You know she's married, right? My cousin laughed. Wine glass in hand, the dinner table went silent. Instead of defending me, my husband turned dark eyes my way and asked if it was true. They had no idea I was clutching two things in my pocket: my notarized divorce papers and proof of her secret affair. Only one person is leaving this dinner with their marriage intact, and I have decided it will be me. My name is Eloise Baker, and I had spent the last 48 hours marinating a prime rib roast that cost more than my first car. The dining room of our Maple Ridge home was a masterpiece of domestic engineering. I had polished the silverware until my fingers ached and arranged the autumn centerpieces with the precision of a surgeon. Outside, the wind was howling, stripping the last of the red and gold leaves from the oaks, but inside, everything was warm and golden. The scent of rosemary, garlic, and expensive red wine filled the air, creating a thick blanket of comfort that I had pulled tight around my family. We were all there. My husband, Nate, sat at the head of the table, looking every inch the successful architect in his cashmere sweater. To his right were his parents, Gerald and Linda, who had driven 2 hours from the city to inspect my housekeeping under the guise of a family visit. To my left sat my own parents, looking slightly uncomfortable in their stiff Sunday best, trying too hard not to spill anything on the white linen tablecloth. And then, across from me, sat my cousin Tessa and her husband, Logan, Tessa Moore, the girl I had shared a bunk bed with every summer until we were 18. She was wearing a dress that was a little too tight and drinking wine a little too fast. Her cheeks were flushed a dark, unnatural pink, and her eyes had that glassy, predatory shine that usually appeared right before she decided to ruin someone's night. I watched her swirl the Pinot Noir in her crystal glass, the liquid slapping against the sides like a stormy sea. The conversation had lulled. We were in that comfortable silence that comes after the main course, the only sounds being the clinking of dessert spoons against china and the soft, unobtrusive jazz playlist I had curated to signal sophistication. Tessa leaned back in her chair, the wood creaking under the shift in weight. She looked at Nate, a slow, sloppy smile spreading across her face. "You know she's married, right?" she asked. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a serrated knife. I froze. My hand, halfway to my water glass, stopped in midair. Tessa giggled, a wet, hiccuping sound. "I mean, I'm still married, technically." The silence that followed was not comfortable. It was vacuum-sealed. The jazz music, which had been a pleasant background hum, suddenly sounded shrill and chaotic, like a warning siren. I felt the blood drain from my face, pooling somewhere in my feet, leaving my head light and my stomach churning. I looked at Nate. In every scenario I had ever played out in my head, because when you have secrets, you play out every scenario. I imagined my husband would laugh. I imagined he would roll his eyes and say, "Don't be ridiculous, Tessa. You have had too much to drink." I imagined he would reach for my hand, squeezing it to reassure me that he knew who I was. But Nate did not laugh. He set his fork down. The metal hit the china with a sharp clink that echoed like a gunshot. He turned his head slowly to look at me. His eyes, usually so warm and brown, had darkened. They were flat, devoid of the affection that had been there when I served the roast. "Is that true, Eloise?" The question hung in the air, heavy and toxic. It was not a defense, it was an interrogation. "Nate," I started, my voice sounding thin and foreign to my own ears. "Don't listen to her. She is drunk." "I am not drunk," Tessa protested, though she swayed in her seat. She pointed a manicured finger at me, the nail polish a violent shade of crimson. "I am just honest. Tell them, Eloise, tell them about Vegas. Tell them about the Elvis impersonator. Tell them how you were 21 and stupid, and how you never actually showed anyone the divorce papers because they do not exist." Linda gasped. It was a theatrical, horrified sound. "Oh my God, Eloise." She brought a hand to her pearl necklace, clutching it as if I had just announced I was a carrier of a contagious disease. "Gerald, my father-in-law. said nothing. He simply tightened his grip on his whiskey glass, his knuckles turning white. He looked at me not with shock, but with a grim sort of satisfaction. The look of a man who had always suspected the girl from the small town in Ohio was not good enough for his son, and finally had the proof. My own parents looked down at their plates, shrinking into their chairs. They knew about the mistake I made when I was 21. They knew about the impulsive drive to Nevada with a musician named Kyle who smelled like cigarettes and cheap cologne. But they also knew I had fixed it, or at least, they thought I had. The shame on their faces burned me hotter than the accusation itself. They were humiliated because their daughter was being undressed in front of the wealthy in-laws. "Nate," I said again, turning my entire body toward him, willing him to look at me, to really see me. It was a mistake. It was a decade ago. We handled it. Nate did not look at me. He looked at Tessa. "What do you mean? Still married?" "I mean," Tessa slurred, enjoying every second of the spotlight, "that you do not just sign a paper on a napkin and call it a day. You have to file things. You have to pay fees. And knowing Eloise well, she's always so forgetful with paperwork, isn't she? Remember how she forgot to renew her car registration last year? It was a tiny, insignificant thing to weaponize, but it landed." Nate's jaw tightened. He finally turned to me. The look on his face broke my heart. And then, instantly, it hardened it. It was a look of calculation. He was not looking at his wife of 3 years. He was looking at a liability. He was looking at a contract that might be void. "Well," Nate said, a humorless, forced smile stretching his lips, but not reaching his eyes. "Is there something I should know? Eloise, are we legitimate?" The air left my lungs. He was doing it. He was taking her word over mine without a second of hesitation. It was as if he had been waiting for this, as if he had been keeping a bag packed by the door of our marriage, just waiting for a reason to leave. And Tessa had just handed him the keys. I looked around the table. Linda was shaking her head in disgust. Gerald was staring at the wall, probably already calculating how much alimony this would save them. Logan, Tessa's husband, looked down at his lap, avoiding my gaze, ashamed of his wife but too weak to stop her. And Tessa was beaming. She looked triumphant. She thought she had won. She thought she had just dropped a nuclear bomb on my perfect suburban life, and that she would get to watch the fallout from the safety of her spectator seat. She thought I was going to cry. She thought I was going to beg. She thought I would run to the bathroom and lock the door and sob until my eyes were swollen shut. For a second, I wanted to. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I felt naked, stripped of the identity I had carefully built over the last 5 years. The perfect wife, the perfect hostess, the woman who belonged at this table. But then, I looked at Nate again. I saw the coldness in his eyes, and something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was quiet, like the sound of a dead branch breaking in a winter wood. I did not cry. I placed my linen napkin on the table, smoothing out the creases with a steady hand. The fabric was cool against my fingertips. I took a slow breath, inhaling the scent of the roast beef that had suddenly lost all its appeal. I stood up. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor. A harsh sound that made Linda flinch. Everyone looked up at me, expecting the breakdown, expecting the denial, expecting hysteria. I smoothed down the skirt of my dress. In the deep pocket hidden in the side seam, my fingers brushed against 2 objects. The first was a folded envelope. It was thick, warm from the heat of my body. Inside was a certified copy of a final decree of divorce from the state of Nevada, dated 7 years ago, signed, stamped, and irrefutable. The second object was my phone. Tessa did not know it yet, but I had seen the way she looked at my husband. I had seen the text messages she thought she had deleted. I had done my own digging, and unlike her, I did not rely on drunk rumors and half-truths. I relied on data. I relied on receipts. "Where are you going?" Nate asked. His voice was sharp, demanding. "We are not done talking about this." I looked down at him. I looked at the man I had vowed to love and cherish, the man who had just thrown me to the wolves because it was convenient. "You are right, Nate," I said. My voice was steady. It did not shake. "We are not done, but if we are going to talk about secrets, and who is sleeping with whom, and who is actually married—" I paused, letting my gaze drift over to Tessa. Her smile faltered. Just a fraction. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. "I think I need to get something from the bedroom," I continued, "because if tonight is about the truth, then let's have the whole truth." I turned and walked out of the dining room. I kept my back straight. I could feel their eyes on me. 12 of them, burning holes into my spine. They were waiting for me to collapse in the hallway. They were waiting for the sound of sobbing. They had no idea. I walked down the hallway, the heels of my shoes clicking rhythmically on the floorboards. Click, like a countdown. "You want to play this game, Tessa. You want to humiliate me in front of everyone. You want to question the validity of my life because you are miserable in yours." I reached into my pocket and gripped the phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. "Fine. Do you want to play in public? I will put it on speakerphone for the whole family." I reached the bedroom door and pushed it open. Darkness swallowed me for a second before I flipped the switch. I was not the victim here. Tonight wasn't about clearing my name anymore. It was about ending hers. 3 years ago, life looked very different. I was living in a cramped studio apartment that smelled perpetually of the Thai curry place downstairs, working as a data analyst for Fable Grid Media. It was a good job, steady and respectable, but I was still just Eloise from a dusty town in Ohio, a girl who thought a wine pairing meant deciding whether to drink red or white with my takeout pizza. Then I met Nate Baker. We met at a fundraising gala for a literacy nonprofit. I was there because my company had bought a table and needed bodies to fill the seats. Nate was there because his family name was on the donor wall. He was charming, handsome in that effortless way that comes from never having to worry about next month's rent, and he looked at me like I was the only person in the room who mattered. When he brought me home to Maple Ridge for the first time, I felt like I had stepped into a different stratosphere. The Baker estate was not just a house. It was a fortress of old money and silent expectations. The ceilings were high enough to form their own weather systems, and the silence in the hallways felt heavy, judgmental. I remember the overwhelming sense of marrying up. It was a dizzying, intoxicating ascent. I traded my polyester blends for silk and cashmere, my chipped ceramic plates for bone china. I learned to speak their language, or at least I tried. I learned that you never talk about money directly, only about investments. I learned that loud laughter was considered uncouth. I navigated this new world with the desperate, wide-eyed anxiety of an immigrant who has lost their passport, terrified that at any moment, someone would realize I did not belong and deport me back to Ohio. And through it all, there was Tessa. Tessa was not just my cousin. She was my history. We had grown up sharing bunk beds during summer vacations, our knees knocking together under the covers as we whispered secrets into the dark. She knew everything about me. She knew about the time I failed algebra, the time I dyed my hair orange by accident, and the time I got my heart broken by the captain of the football team. When I started dating Nate, I thought she would be happy for me. I thought she would be thrilled that one of us had made it. But as my engagement ring grew heavier on my finger, a diamond that cost more than my father's pickup truck, the light in Tessa's eyes began to change. It shifted from warmth to something colder, something sharp and green. It was a subtle curdling of affection into envy. I was too naive to see the danger then. I still trusted her implicitly. That is why, one night when we were drinking cheap margaritas on her porch, I told her the one secret I had buried deep beneath the soil of my new life. "I was married once," I had whispered, the tequila burning my throat. "When I was 21, Tessa's eyes had widened, gleaming in the porch light. "What, to whom?" "A musician, Kyle. We were in Vegas. We were young, stupid, and absolutely wasted. We found a chapel that sold hot dogs next door. I woke up the next morning with a headache that felt like a drill and a ring that turned my finger green." I told her everything. I told her about the panic, the scramble to find a lawyer, the swift annulment and divorce that followed before the ink was even dry on the marriage certificate. It was a blip, a glitch in the matrix of my life. I had erased Kyle from my history, sanitized my past, so I could be the perfect, untouched bride for Nate. "Does Nate know?" Tessa had asked, her voice low. "No," I said, shaking my head frantically. "And he never can. It would kill him. Tessa, his family is so traditional. They would look at me like I am damaged goods." Tessa had squeezed my hand then. She smiled, and it looked genuine. "Your secret is safe with me, Elle. Sisters never tell." I believed her. I made her my maid of honor. Standing there in the bridal suite, adjusting my veil, she looked at me in the mirror and said, "We never betray family. Eloise, I have got your back." I was so high on happiness and relief that I missed the slight edge in her voice, the way her smile did not quite reach her eyes when she looked at my designer gown. I handed her the ammunition to destroy me, and I thanked her for holding it. The first cracks began to show during those early family dinners at the Baker house. I was trying so hard to be the perfect daughter-in-law. I spent hours reading etiquette blogs, learning the difference between a salad fork and a fish fork, practicing how to sit with my ankles crossed just so. But nervousness makes you clumsy. I remember one dinner vividly. It was about 6 months after the wedding. I reached for the bread roll and knocked over my water glass. The crystal shattered against the edge of the table, sending water soaking into the pristine white tablecloth. Linda, my mother-in-law, did not yell. That would have been too pedestrian. She just closed her eyes for a brief second, let out a soft sigh, and signaled the housekeeper. "It is all right, Eloise," she said, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. "Accidents happen. I suppose you are not used to such crowded table settings." She turned her gaze to me, her eyes scanning my face like she was reading a nutrition label and finding too many artificial ingredients. "Tell me again, dear, what did your father do for a living? He was in manual labor. Was it—" "He was a foreman at the auto plant," I said, my face burning. "Right," Gerald grunted from the head of the table, cutting his steak with surgical precision. "Honest work, hard work." He said it the way one might describe a donkey pulling a cart. That was when Tessa chimed in. She was sitting across from me, picking at her salad. She laughed, a bright tinkling sound that drew everyone's attention. "Oh, Uncle Gerald, do not make Eloise blush," Tessa said, winking at me. "Our family is definitely more beer in a can than scotch in a crystal. Remember that summer Eloise tried to ride the mechanical bull at the state fair? She has always had a bit of a wild streak, haven't you, Elle?" The table went quiet. Linda tilted her head, her pearl earrings swaying. "A wild streak, really? You seem so tame now. Eloise." "I was a teenager," I stammered, trying to laugh it off, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. "Everyone does silly things when they are young." "Exactly," Tessa grinned. "Like that road trip you took when you were 21. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right?" She left the sentence hanging there, dangling like a loose thread on a sweater. If you pulled it, the whole thing would unravel. I stared at her, pleading silently with my eyes. "Stop. Please stop." Tessa just took a sip of her wine, looking innocent. She was planting seeds. She was painting a picture of me as unstable, impulsive, trashy, and she was doing it under the guise of being the fun cousin. I went home that night and cried in the shower so Nate would not hear me. I was exhausted. The sheer effort of maintaining the facade was wearing me down. I organized the charity auctions. I remembered every birthday, every anniversary. I sent handwritten thank you notes for gifts I hated. I cooked elaborate meals from scratch, hoping for a single nod of approval from Gerald, a single hug from Linda that did not feel like she was afraid of catching poverty from me. But it was never enough. I was always the girl from Ohio who had gotten lucky. The seed Tessa planted began to sprout in the most terrifying way. It was late one night, not long after our first anniversary. We had been at a wedding for one of Nate's college friends, and the open bar had been generous. Nate was sitting on the edge of our bed, loosening his tie, his eyes a little unfocused. He looked at me, and for a moment, he did not look like my husband. He looked like a stranger who had just heard a rumor. "You know," he said, his words slightly slurred, "Tessa tells some crazy stories about you guys growing up." I froze while taking off my earrings. "Oh, like what?" "Like that Vegas trip," he chuckled, but the laugh was dry. "I still cannot believe you were that reckless. You really handled all that, right? Like, officially." My stomach dropped through the floor. "Handled what?" "Nate. The Vegas thing. If you guys got hitched or whatever, you made sure it was legal. Right? The split." He was half joking. He had to be. But underneath the alcohol, there was a flash of genuine anxiety. It was the anxiety of a man who had significant assets, a man who had been raised to protect his inheritance above all else. He was asking if I was a liability. "Of course, Nate," I said, forcing a laugh that sounded like sandpaper. "It was a joke. It was nothing. Why would you even ask that?" "No reason," he said, flopping back onto the pillows. "Just Tessa made a joke about paperwork. You know how she is." I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling fan, watching the blades slice through the air. I told myself it was fine. I told myself the past was dead. I had buried it under 7 years of responsibility and good behavior. I had buried it under this expensive house and this perfect marriage. I did not realize then that you cannot bury something when the person standing next to you is holding a shovel. I did not realize that Tessa had kept that shovel sharp and ready, waiting for the exact moment when digging up the corpse of my past would cause the most damage. I thought she was my blood. I did not know she was a parasite, waiting to feed on the wreckage of the life I had built. And now, 3 years later, at this dinner table, she had finally struck the ground, but she forgot one thing. When you dig up a grave, you have to be careful you do not fall in yourself. The unraveling of my marriage did not begin with a shout or a slamming door. It began in the quiet, blue-lit glow of a laptop screen on a Tuesday evening in late September. I had walked into the home office to tell Nate that dinner was ready. I was wearing socks, so my footsteps were silent on the plush carpet. Nate was hunched over his desk, his posture rigid, the way a man sits when he is doing something he knows he should not be doing. He did not hear me until I was standing right behind his chair. On the screen was a website with a bland, governmental header. I saw the seal of the state of Nevada. I saw the words Clark County Courts and Case Search, and in the search bar, typed in stark, black letters, was my maiden name. "Nate," I asked, my voice soft. He jumped. It was a physical, guilty startle that knocked his pen off the desk. His hand flew to the trackpad, and with a frantic swipe, he changed the tab to his email. "Jesus, Eloise." He spun around, his face flushed. "You scared me." "I am sorry," I said, my eyes still fixed on the computer screen, even though the incriminating tab was gone. "What were you looking at?" "Nothing," he said, too quickly. He adjusted his glasses, a nervous tic he had when he was lying. "Just checking a contract for the firm. One of the partners is dealing with a dispute in Las Vegas. Boring, jurisdictional stuff." He stood up and kissed my cheek, but his lips felt dry, and he pulled away a fraction of a second too soon. "Dinner smells good," he said, ushering me out of the room. He did not close the laptop. He put it to sleep, the screen going black like a shutting eye. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him, but the seed of doubt had already been planted, and it was feeding on the silence between us. A week later, the doubt bloomed into something sharper. We were arguing about something trivial, the landscaping bill, I think, or maybe the color of the new curtains for the guest room. It was the kind of bickering that married couples do, a way to vent steam. But Nate was not venting. He was attacking. "You just do not pay attention to the details, Eloise," he snapped, tossing the bill onto the counter. "You drift through things and expect them to sort themselves out. I handle the entire household budget." "Nate," I shot back, "I am not drifting." He turned on his heel, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. He took a long drink, staring at me over the rim of the bottle. When he lowered it, His voice was dangerously quiet. "Let's hope so," he said. "As long as you did the paperwork right this time." The room went cold. The air conditioning hummed, a low mechanical drone that suddenly sounded very loud. "What is that supposed to mean?" I asked. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw the calculation in his eyes. He realized he had said too much. "Nothing," he muttered, walking past me. "Just be careful with the bills." But I knew it was not about the bills. This time, as opposed to the last time, as opposed to Vegas, he was not looking at me as his wife anymore. He was looking at me as a risk. I was a potential error in his life spreadsheet, a variable that needed to be audited. It was a feeling that made my skin crawl, the realization that the person you share a bed with is conducting due diligence on your past. Tessa became a ghost in our house. She was not physically there, but her presence was constant. Her name would pop up on Nate's phone screen in the evenings. "Tessa Moore. Tessa. Tess. Why is she texting you so late?" I asked once, trying to keep my voice casual. "She is asking for investment advice," Nate said, not looking up from his phone. "Logan does not know the first thing about the market, so she comes to me. She is worried about their retirement accounts." I bought it. Or rather, I forced myself to buy it. It made sense. Nate was the successful one, the financial rock of the family. Why wouldn't she ask him? It seemed innocent enough until the night I walked past the study and heard her voice. Nate had put her on speakerphone. He often did that when he was multitasking, typing away while talking. The door was cracked open just an inch, a sliver of yellow light spilling into the dark hallway. I stopped. I did not mean to eavesdrop, but then I heard my name. "I am just looking out for you." "Nate," Tessa's voice said. It was tinny and distorted by the phone speaker, but the sweetness was unmistakable. It was a poisonous, cloying sweetness. "You know how it is in her hometown. People there are not exactly legal scholars. Does anyone there even know what a filing fee looks like?" My breath caught in my throat. I pressed my back against the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Eloise is not stupid, Tessa," Nate said. But his voice lacked conviction. It was hesitant, probing. "I did not say she was stupid," Tessa purred. "I said she was reckless and drunk. You heard her stories. They were wasted." "Nate, wasted. Do you really think, in that state, she remembered to file a motion to annul? Or did she just tear up the paper and assume it was over because the hangover wore off?" There was silence on the line, a long, heavy silence where my husband should have defended me. He should have said, "She told me it was handled, and I trust her." Instead, Nate sighed. "I don't know, Tess. She says she did." "She says," Tessa echoed. "But do you have proof? Because if you don't do well, I would hate to see you lose everything you have worked for because of a technicality." I backed away slowly, terrified that the floorboards would creak and give me away. I retreated to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the mattress, my hands shaking uncontrollably. They were not talking about investments. They were conspiring. Tessa was feeding his insecurity, watering his paranoia, and Nate was drinking it up. The next morning, I did what I should have done the moment Tessa made her first snide comment. I took control. I waited until Nate left for work, and then I locked myself in the home office. My hands were still trembling as I dialed the number for the Clark County Family Court. "Thank you for calling the 8th Judicial District Court," the automated voice chirped. "For family law, press 1. I pressed 1. I waited on hold for 45 minutes. The hold music was a static loop of classical piano that grated on my nerves. I sat there, staring out the window at the manicured lawn of our suburban fortress, feeling like an imposter in my own life. Finally, a clerk answered. She sounded tired and overworked. "I need to request a certified copy of a divorce decree," I said, my voice steady despite the nausea rolling in my stomach. "From 8 years ago." "Case number?" she asked. "I do not have it. Can you search by name?" "There is a search fee," she said flatly, "and a copy fee, and a certification fee." I do not care, I said. I will pay whatever it costs. The process was humiliating. I had to download a form, fill it out with my black ink pen, scan my driver's license, and fax the request because their online portal was down for maintenance. I had to prove who I was. I had to prove that the 21-year-old girl who made a mistake in a neon-lit chapel was the same woman sitting in this expensive chair in Maple Ridge. I paid $75 for expedited processing and overnight shipping. When I hung up the phone, I felt drained. I had just ordered the proof of my own innocence, but it felt like an admission of guilt. I was playing their game. I was validating their suspicion. The waiting was the worst part. For 3 days, every time the mail truck drove down our street, my heart jumped. I checked the tracking number on my phone obsessively. Out for delivery, in transit, arriving by 8 p.m. During those 3 days, the distance between Nate and me grew into a chasm. He stopped touching me. When we sat on the couch to watch TV, he sat on the far end. When I brushed past him in the kitchen, he flinched. He stayed late at the office, claiming he had to review end-of-quarter reports, but I knew he was avoiding me. I tried to bring up the future. My mom was asking about Thanksgiving, I said one night over dinner. She wants to know if we are hosting again. We will see, Nate said, not looking up from his steak. And what about that trip to Italy next spring? The flight prices are dropping. I said we will see. Eloise, he snapped. I cannot commit to anything right now. Work is complicated. He was putting our life on hold. He was freezing our assets, emotional and financial, until he could determine if I was a safe bet. But the relief I expected did not come. Because that afternoon, I heard the conversation that broke me. Nate had come home early to change for a client dinner. He was in the driveway, sitting in his car with the engine running. I had walked out to the garage to ask him if he wanted me to iron his blue shirt. The garage door was down, trapping the sound. I was about to knock on the driver's side window when I heard a voice booming through the car's premium sound system. It was a deep, authoritative voice, a lawyer's voice. It is a tricky situation, Nate, the man said. I froze, my hand hovering inches from the glass. The window was cracked open just an inch to let in the cool autumn air. If the first marriage was never legally dissolved, the lawyer continued, then your marriage was void from the start. It is bigamy, technically, though usually, it is just a civil mess. I do not care about the bigamy charge, Nate said. His voice was cold, devoid of any concern for me. I care about the assets. If the marriage is void, does she have any claim to the house? What about the portfolio? I put 80% of the down payment on this place. I stood there, paralyzed. The concrete floor of the garage seemed to tilt beneath my feet. He was not asking if our vows meant anything. He was not asking if he could help me fix a clerical error so we could stay together. He was asking if he could keep the house. He was asking if he could walk away from me without losing a dime. If it is void, the lawyer said, she has no marital rights. She is essentially a roommate. You would walk away with everything you brought in. Good, Nate said. He let out a breath, a sound of pure relief. That is good to know. I just need to be sure before I make a move. Get the records. Nate, do not act until you have the paper trail. I am working on it, Nate said. I turned around and walked back into the house. I did not run. I walked with a strange, numb calmness. I went into the kitchen, picked up the iron, and put it away. I went back out to my own car, parked in the driveway. I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I stared at the windshield, but I did not see the trees or the street. I saw the last 3 years of my life dissolving like sugar in hot water. All the dinners I had cooked, all the shirts I had ironed, all the times I had defended him to my parents, telling them he was different, that he really saw me. It was all a lie, to him. I was not a partner. I was an investment that might have gone bad. He was willing to liquidate our marriage to save his equity. Tessa had whispered a lie, and instead of shielding me, my husband had called a lawyer to see how much he could keep in the divorce. I sat there alone in the car as the sun went down. casting long, dark shadows across the dashboard. I was no longer the frightened girl from Ohio trying to fit in. I was something else entirely. I was a woman who knew exactly what she was worth, and I was about to show them that I was the most expensive mistake they would ever make. The universe has a funny way of handing you a loaded gun, just when you think you're staring down the barrel of one. For weeks. I had been walking around with a target painted on my back, feeling the weight of Nate's suspicion and Tessa's whispers. I felt small. I felt hunted. But then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, the wind shifted. I had come back early from a business trip to Chicago. The client had rescheduled. So I landed in Brookdale at 6 in the evening. I was not ready to go home yet. The house had become a cold, silent mausoleum where my husband treated me like a roommate he was trying to evict. So I decided to stop at a place near the airport to meet a freelance graphic designer I had been vetting for a side project. The meeting place is the bar inside the Pines Inn. It was not the kind of place people like the Bakers went. It was a budget chain, the kind with beige stucco walls and carpets that smelled of industrial cleaner and stale cigarettes. It was the kind of place you went when you did not want to be seen. I was walking through the lobby toward the parking lot, digging in my purse for my keys. When the elevator dinged, the sound was sharp in the quiet lobby. I glanced up instinctively. The doors slid open, and my cousin Tessa stepped out. Time seemed to stutter. For a split second, my brain could not process what I was seeing. Tessa lived 40 minutes away in a gated community. She shopped at boutiques. She did not frequent 2-star airport hotels on a Tuesday night. She was not alone. Walking beside her was a man I had never seen before. He was tall, with graying temples, and the sort of expensive suit that looked ridiculous against the peeling wallpaper of the lobby. But it was not just that they were together, it was how they looked. Tessa was fumbling with the top button of her blouse, her fingers moving with a frantic, hasty energy. Her hair, usually sprayed into a helmet of perfection, was loose and slightly tangled on one side, and her lipstick, a shade of plum she had worn since college, was smeared just slightly at the corner of her mouth. She looked up and locked eyes with me. She froze. I saw the color drain from her face so fast it looked like a physical blow. She stopped dead in her tracks, causing the man to bump into her shoulder. "Eloise!" Her voice was a squeak. She cleared her throat, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace of pain. "Oh my God, what are you doing here?" "I just landed," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I did not move. I stood my ground, letting the silence stretch. "Meeting a freelancer. What about you?" "Tessa, this is a long way from the country club." "I am working," she stammered. She gestured vaguely to the man beside her. "Meeting a client. For insurance. You know, life insurance policies. People like to meet in neutral locations." She was lying. I knew Tessa's insurance job was mostly a hobby she used to justify buying new blazers. She sold maybe 2 policies a year to her husband's friends. She did not meet clients at airport hotels at 7 in the evening with messed up hair. "Right," I said. I shifted my gaze to the man. "This is Declan," Tessa said quickly, stepping between us as if to block my view. "Declan, this is my cousin, Eloise." "Pleasure," Declan said. His voice was smooth, practiced, but he did not offer his hand. He kept his hands shoved deep into his trouser pockets. I looked at him, really looked at him. He was handsome in a bland, corporate way, but what caught my eye was the way he stood. He was standing 3 feet away from Tessa, a rigid, artificial distance that screamed they had just been much, much closer. And then, he shifted his weight, pulling his left hand out of his pocket to check his watch. There was a gold band on his ring finger, but the diamond chip, or maybe it was a design, I could not tell, was facing his palm. He had spun the ring inward. It was the universal gesture of a married man trying to feel single for an hour. "Well," Tessa said, her laugh sounding brittle, like dry leaves crunching, "we should get going. Logan is waiting for dinner. You know how he gets if I'm late." "Yeah," I said. "I know." I watched them walk to the automatic doors. They did not touch. They did not look at each other. They walked like strangers who shared a dirty secret. I drove home that night with a strange buzzing in my ears. I did not tell Nate. Why would I? He made it clear we were not sharing lives anymore. We were just sharing equity. But for the first time in months, I did not feel like the only liar in the family. I started paying attention. Once you suspect a pattern, you see it everywhere. It is like buying a red car and suddenly realizing half the city drives red cars. I started watching Tessa's Instagram stories. She posted constantly the curated life of a wealthy suburban wife, but now, I looked closer. 3 days after the hotel incident, she posted a photo of a martini glass with the caption, "Working late grind never stops." The location tag said, "Downtown Business District," but the background was blurry. I zoomed in. In the corner of the frame, just behind the glass, was a distinctive lamp, a brass base with a green shade. I recognized it. It was the same lamp that sat on the bedside tables at the Pines Inn. I had seen it on their website when I looked up the rates out of curiosity. Then there were the group chats. The Baker family chat was usually a stream of birthday reminders and photos of grandchildren. But one afternoon, a message popped up from Tessa. "Can't wait to see you later. Babe, the blue dress." It sat there for 10 seconds. Then, the message was deleted. A moment later, she typed, "Oops, meant for Logan. Sorry, guys." Linda sent a heart emoji. Nate sent a thumbs up. Everyone thought it was cute. A loving wife flirting with her husband. But I knew Logan hated blue. He had told me once at a barbecue that he thought blue made women look cold. Tessa knew that. She never wore blue for Logan. The pieces were falling into place. But I needed something solid. I needed something I could hold in my hand. The opportunity came 2 weeks later. Tessa stopped by my house on a Saturday afternoon. She claimed she was just in the neighborhood and wanted to drop off a catalog for a charity auction. But I knew she was sniffing around. She wanted to see if Nate and I were still freezing each other out. She wanted to make sure her little seeds of doubt were still blooming. "God, it is chilly out," she said, shedding her trench coat in my foyer. "Do you mind if I stay for coffee?" "Sure," I said. "The kitchen is open." She left her coat on the entryway bench. While she was in the kitchen, making a show of admiring my new espresso machine and asking pointed questions about why Nate was working on a Saturday again. I excused myself to use the restroom. I walked past the entryway. The coat was lying there, a heap of expensive beige wool. I did not hesitate. I did not feel guilty. I felt surgical. I reached into the right pocket, lip balm, car keys, a crumpled tissue. I checked the left pocket. My fingers brushed against plastic and paper. I pulled them out. It was a key card, a generic, magnetic strip card with a photo of a pine tree on it, and wrapped around it was a receipt. I unfolded the paper. It was from the Pines Inn, dated yesterday. Check-in time 11:30 in the morning. Check-out time 2:15 in the afternoon. Room 204. Guest name Declan Vance. Room type King Leisure. Occupancy 2. I stared at the receipt. 2 hours and 45 minutes in the middle of a Friday. Just enough time for a lunch break. I shoved the receipt and the keycard back into her pocket, my heart pounding a rhythm against my ribs. I walked into the bathroom, turned on the tap, and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. "You are not crazy," I whispered to my reflection. "And you are not the villain." I went back to the kitchen. Tessa was sipping her coffee, looking angelic. "You know, Elle," she said, tilting her head with faux sympathy, "I notice Nate seems a little distant lately. Is everything okay? I mean, really okay? You can tell me. I know marriage can be hard when there are trust issues." I smiled. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, stretching my lips over my teeth when all I wanted to do was scream. "We are working through it, Tessa," I said. "Relationships are complex. You know how it is. Sometimes people have secrets they think are buried, but they always come out eventually." She blinked, and for a second, her smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "So true. Well, I hope you guys figure it out. Logan and I are just so blessed. Total transparency. That is the key." Transparency, I echoed. Absolutely. I needed one more nail in the coffin. A few days later, I texted Tessa and asked if she wanted to grab lunch near her office. I told her I needed advice on a project. She agreed, probably eager to gather more intel on my failing marriage to feed to Nate. I met her at a bistro downtown. We sat at a small table by the window. Tessa was in high spirits, talking about Logan's upcoming promotion and how they were thinking of buying a vacation home in Cabo. "He is just so obsessed with me lately," she laughed, spearing a piece of kale. "It is almost annoying. He texts me constantly." On the table, her phone and iPhone with a pink case sat face up. It was silent. "That is sweet," I said. "It is nice to be wanted." "Oh, totally," she said. But sometimes a girl needs space, right?" While she was talking, I noticed something. She kept glancing down, not at the phone on the table, but at her lap. Her hand was under the table, resting on her knee. Every few minutes, her shoulder would dip slightly, and her eyes would dart down. "I am going to grab a refill," I said. Standing up, I walked toward the soda fountain, but I looped back around. Approaching our table from behind her, the bistro was noisy, filled with the clatter of plates, so she did not hear me. I looked down. The drawer of her purse was open on the chair next to her. Inside, nestled between a makeup bag and a wallet, was a second phone. It was an older model, black, with a cracked screen. As I watched, the screen lit up. It was silent, but the buzz against the leather bag was audible if you were close enough. A text message preview popped up. Declan. "Can't stop thinking about last night. That dress." I felt a cold, hard satisfaction settle in my gut. It was not happiness. It was the feeling of a detective who finally finds the murder weapon. I returned to my seat. "Everything okay?" I asked. Tessa jumped slightly, sliding her hand out of her purse. "Yeah, just checking the time. Logan is asking when I will be back." "You know," I said, stirring my iced tea. "You guys seem so happy. I always admired that." Tessa sighed, a dramatic, heavy sound. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Honestly, Elle, it is a show. Logan is suffocating. He checks my mileage. He asks who I am with every second. He is so jealous. Sometimes I feel like I just need to breathe." She looked at me with wide, pleading eyes, inviting me to join her in the brotherhood of suffering wives. She was painting herself as the victim. She was the poor, trapped woman, and Logan was the controlling monster. Just like she had painted me as the deceitful gold digger and Nate as the poor, duped husband. She was projecting. She was taking her own sins and pasting them onto everyone else so that no one would look at her. "That sounds terrible," I said. "You must be exhausted." "I am," she said, "but I keep it together. For the family." I went home that afternoon and opened a new note on my phone. I did not name it Revenge. I named it Tessa. I started typing. October 14th, The Pines Inn. Saw Tessa with Declan Vance. 7:00 p.m. October 17th. Instagram story matches. Pines Inn decor. November 2nd, receipt found in coat pocket. Room 204. Declan Vance. November 5th, second phone observed. Text from Declan confirming the affair. I logged onto the hotel website again. I found the phone number for the front desk. I typed it into my contacts. I hesitated for a moment over the name field. I could have named it The Pines. I could have named it Evidence. But then I thought about the way Tessa had looked at me across the dinner table, the way she had smiled while she tried to dismantle my life. She thought she had locked me out. She thought she had cornered me in a burning building with no way out. She didn't know I had found a key to her house. I typed in the name Emergency Exit. I hit save. The contact sat there, innocent and silent, right below Electrician and above Florist. I was not ready to use it yet. I was just gathering wood for the fire. But for the first time in months, as I sat in my silent kitchen, I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who had just realized that the person throwing stones was living in a house made of the thinnest, most fragile glass imaginable. And I had a pocket full of rocks. The envelope from Nevada arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, and I grabbed it before Nate could even see the return address. I didn't open it right away. I slid it into the bottom drawer of my vanity under my winter scarves and let the weight of that raised seal sit there for a few hours like proof and a warning at the same time. That evening, I finally cut it open. Inside was the final decree of divorce, stamped and absolute. I ran my thumb over the seal once, then drove straight to Harper Quinn. I needed a lawyer to say out loud what I already knew. I was free long before I met Nate. I did not go straight to Nate. I needed to be sure. I needed the kind of certainty that could cut through gaslighting like a laser. I got back in my car and drove 40 minutes to downtown Brookdale to see Harper Quinn. She was a family law attorney who charged $400 an hour and had a reputation for eating unfaithful husbands for breakfast. Harper looked at the document for all of 10 seconds. She adjusted her glasses, looked at me, and then tossed the paper back across her mahogany desk. "You are divorced, Eloise," she said, her voice flat and bored, which was exactly what I wanted to hear. "You have been divorced for nearly a decade. This decree is absolute. There is no ambiguity here, no loopholes, no gray areas." "So there is no way," I asked, gripping the arms of the chair, "that a court could say my current marriage is invalid? No way they could say I committed bigamy?" Harper laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. "If anyone is telling you that, they are either lying to your face or they do not understand the first thing about the law. You are legally married to Nathan Baker. Your assets are marital property. You are his wife, not his roommate." I nodded, feeling the tightness in my chest loosen just a fraction. "Thank you, Harper." "Eloise," she said as I stood up, "if your husband is the one asking these questions, you do not have a legal problem. You have a marriage problem." I walked out of her office into the bright, blinding sunlight of the afternoon. I felt armed. I felt dangerous. But before I could even unlock my car, my phone buzzed in my purse. It was a text from Tessa. "Hey, sweetie, don't be mad at Nate. He is just worried. You know how men are. They are terrified of being used. He is just trying to be smart. Love you." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. The audacity of it took my breath away. She was positioning herself as the peacemaker, the benevolent interpreter of my husband's cruelty, while she was the one who had handed him the knife in the first place. She was framing his suspicion as being smart, and my history as using him. I drove home in silence, the anger crystallizing in my gut into something hard and cold. I was done crying. I was done feeling like the poor girl from Ohio who should be grateful just to be allowed at the table. When Nate got home that evening, I was waiting for him in the kitchen. I had not started dinner. The counters were bare, except for one thing. The envelope from Nevada sat in the center of the granite island. Nate walked in, loosening his tie. "Hey," he said, looking around for the usual smell of cooking. "Did we order in?" "Sit down, Nate," I said. He stopped. He looked at my face, and for the first time in weeks, he actually saw me. He saw the set of my jaw, the stillness in my shoulders. He walked over to the island and looked down at the envelope. "What is this?" he asked. "Open it," I said. He reached out, his fingers hesitating for a split second before he pulled the document out. He read it standing up. I watched his eyes scan the lines. I watched his shoulders drop. I watched the color return to his cheeks as the fear of losing his precious assets evaporated. "Oh," he said. He let out a long, shaky breath. "Okay. So it is done. It was done years ago." "Yes," I said. "It was done, just like I told you." He looked up at me, a smile of relief breaking across his face. "God, Eloise, that is a relief. I mean, you have to understand why I was worried. Without the paper, it is just word of mouth, right? But this fixes everything." He reached out to touch my arm, but I took a step back. His hand fell into the empty air between us. "Does it?" I asked. "Does it fix everything, Nate?" His smile faltered. "What do you mean? We are good. You are legal. We do not have to worry about the house or the portfolio. You mean you do not have to worry about the house? I corrected him. I want to know something, Nate, and I want you to tell me the truth. Did you talk to a lawyer about this before you talked to me? He looked away. He adjusted his glasses. Eloise, look, I have a responsibility to protect our future. Did you talk to a lawyer? I repeated, my voice rising just a notch. I asked a friend, he admitted, his voice defensive. I just asked what would happen if the rumors were true. I had to know. Eloise, I had to know where I stood. Where you stood, I said. Not where we stood. I built this life, he snapped, the nice guy mask slipping for a moment. I put the down payment on this house. My family's money paid for the renovations. I just wanted to protect what I had built, in case you were not honest from the start, in case you were just trying to get a piece of it. The words hung in the air like smoke. In case you were just trying to get a piece of it, there it was. The truth. After 3 years of marriage, after sleeping in the same bed, after building a life together, he still saw me as a grifter. He still saw me as the girl from the trailer park who had tricked her way into the palace. We were not a team. We were in an acquisition deal that he was afraid had gone sour. I looked at him, and I felt something inside me die. It was the part of me that loved him unconditionally. It withered and turned to dust right there in the kitchen. Who told you there was a problem? Nate? I asked quietly. Who put the idea in your head that I was lying? He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. He looked down at the granite counter. Was it Tessa? I asked. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. He just stood there, shifting his weight, looking like a child who had been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. His silence was a scream. I see, I said. Dinner is in the fridge. You can heat it up yourself. I walked out of the kitchen. I walked past the living room, up the stairs, and into the guest room that I had converted into my home office. I locked the door. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I turned on the desk lamp and sat in the pool of yellow light. I opened the drawer where I had hidden the file on Tessa. I laid everything out on the desk. It looked like a war map. On the left side was my defense. The certified divorce decree from Nevada. The letter from Harper Quinn confirming my status. The proof that I was an honest woman who had made a youthful mistake and fixed it. On the right side was the offense. The receipt from the Pines Inn with Declan Vance's name on it. The photo of the hotel lamp from Tessa's Instagram. The printed screenshots of her texts. The notes about the second phone. I looked at the two piles. Nate had been ready to divorce me based on a whisper. He had been ready to throw me out on the street to save his equity because Tessa had suggested I might be a fraud. Meanwhile, Tessa, the moral arbiter of the family, the one whispering poison in everyone's ears, was cheating on her husband in cheap hotels. She was lying to Logan, a man who adored her. She was using my past to distract everyone from her present. I realized then that if I just showed Nate the divorce papers, I would win the battle, but I would lose the war. He would apologize. He would say he was just stressed. Tessa would laugh it off, say she was just concerned, and life would go on. She would still be the beloved cousin. I would still be the outsider who had been forgiven. No, that was not enough. She had tried to burn my house down. It was only fair that I returned the favor, but I was not going to use a match. I was going to use a flamethrower. And I was not going to do it in private. She had humiliated me at a family dinner. She had announced my shame to the entire table. I looked at the receipt again. Declan Vance, room 204. A plan began to form in my mind. It was terrifying. It was cruel. It was absolutely perfect. I did not just want to clear my name. I wanted to expose her. And I wanted to do it in front of the one person she was terrified of losing. Logan. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dark room. I right-clicked on the desktop and selected New Folder. The cursor blinked. Waiting for a name, I typed in all caps, Truth Night. I began to drag the files into the folder. Click, the scan of the divorce decree. That was for Nate. Click, the photo of the hotel receipt. That was for Logan. Click, the screenshot of the text messages. That was for the audience. My heart, which had been racing for weeks, finally slowed down. It beat with a heavy, steady rhythm. I was not the victim anymore. I was the director, and the show was about to begin. The following week was not spent crying. It was spent in a state of cold, administrative fury. I felt less like a heartbroken wife and more like a forensic accountant auditing a bankrupt company. If Tessa wanted to play games with paperwork and legalities, I was going to show her what a truly meticulous paper trail looked like. My first move was the hotel receipt. I knew Tessa had thrown the physical copy away after I confronted her with it in my mind. Or maybe she burned it. It did not matter. Data is sticky. I called the Pines Inn on a Wednesday morning, putting on my best harried executive voice. "Hi, this is the assistant to Mr. Declan Vance," I said, typing rapidly on my keyboard to make background noise. "He stayed with you last week in room 204. He lost the folio, and accounting is breathing down my neck for the expense report. Can you email me a PDF? I just need to verify the last 4 digits of the card on file." The clerk said. I paused. I did not have that, but I had something else. Actually, he paid part cash, didn't he? He mentioned a cash deposit. It was a guess. People having affairs love cash. "Oh, right," the clerk said. "I see the cash deposit here. Okay, since it was cash, I can just send it to the email on file, or a new one." "The email on file is his personal one." I lied smoothly. "Send it to his work email. That is," I gave them a burner email address I had created 10 minutes ago. 2 minutes later, the inbox pinged. I had it. The official PDF, Declan Vance, room 204, occupancy 2. It was beautiful. Next, I needed to tie Tessa to that room. I called Maya Rodriguez. Maya was a data analyst at FableGrid who spent her lunch break solving cold cases on Reddit. She was the kind of person who could find your grandmother's high school yearbook photo in 5 minutes if she had your zip code. I met her at a coffee shop far away from Maple Ridge. I slid my laptop over to her. "I need you to look at these photos," I said. Maya scrolled through Tessa's Instagram. She pulled up the metadata. She cross-referenced timestamps. She did things with image contrast that I did not understand. "Okay," Maya said, chewing on a biscotti. "See this selfie she posted on October 14th? The caption says, 'Client meeting downtown. The geotag is disabled, but look at the reflection in the window behind her.'" She zoomed in. "That is not a downtown skyline. That is a billboard for a specific personal injury lawyer. I looked it up. That billboard is located on the highway exit, right next to the airport. Specifically, right next to the Pines Inn." "And Declan?" I asked. "Declan Vance," Maya said, typing his name into a flight tracking database. "He is a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical company. He travels a lot. Look at this. Tessa's late nights align perfectly with his travel schedule. September 4th. He was in town. She was at a networking event. August 12th. He was in town. She was helping a friend move. It is sloppy. Eloise, honestly, I thought you guys just drank wine and talked about Pilates. I had no idea your life was this much of a true crime documentary." "It is not a documentary," I said, closing the laptop. "It is a horror movie, and I am the final girl. I took everything to Harper Quinn. I needed to make sure I was bulletproof." Harper reviewed my collection with the critical eye of a bomb disposal expert. "This is good," Harper said, tapping the hotel receipt. "And this flight log is public information, so that is fine. But listen to me closely. Eloise, do not hack her email. Do not put a tracker on her car. Do not record her without consent. If you do anything illegal, you become the bad guy. And this whole thing gets thrown out of court. We use what she gave us. We use her arrogance against her." "I understand," I said. "Everything I have is from public sources or things she literally left in my house." "Good," Harper said. "Then nail her." I went home and rebuilt the 2 files I'd already laid out on my desk. For Nate and his parents. I kept it clean and clinical, just the Nevada decree and Harper's affidavit. Nothing to argue with. For Logan, I packed the real story, the hotel PDF, Maya's timeline, the texts, the second phone, every piece in order, every date highlighted, one folder to end their suspicion, one to end her, but I knew paper could be ripped up. I knew Nate might try to hide it to save face. So I created a failsafe. I opened my laptop and created a new folder on the desktop. I named it Truth Night. I dragged every single file into it. Then, I opened my email client. I drafted a new email addressed to Logan's work address and his personal Gmail. Subject from Eloise. You deserve the whole story. I attached the folder. I did not hit send. I saved it as a draft. It was sitting there, a loaded gun on my hard drive, waiting for a single click. Now I just needed the stage. I checked the calendar. Our third wedding anniversary was coming up on Saturday. It was the perfect cover, a celebration, a family gathering. It was the kind of event where attendance was mandatory and where family unity was the theme. I sent the text to the group chat. Hey everyone, Nate and I are hosting a small dinner this Saturday to celebrate 3 years. Just family. I am making my signature roast. Hope you can all make it. Linda replied immediately with a heart emoji. Gerald sent a thumbs up. Then I texted Tessa individually. I knew she would be hesitant. I knew she would be wondering if I was onto her. I had to play to her vanity. Tessa, please come. I know things have been weird lately, but Linda was just saying the other day how much she misses your energy. She really thinks of you like a daughter. It would mean a lot to the family if you were there. It was the bait she could not resist. Tessa lived for the validation of my in-laws. She needed to believe she was the favorite, the one who really belonged, unlike the interloper from Ohio. Of course, Elsie replied. 3 minutes later, we wouldn't miss it. Happy anniversary. Saturday arrived with a gray, overcast sky. I spent the afternoon prepping the house. I did not just clean, I staged the scene. I set the table with military precision. I placed the name cards strategically. I put Nate at the head of the table. I put myself at the other end. I placed Tessa on Nate's right, directly in his line of sight, and I placed Logan right next to her. I wanted them close. I wanted them to feel connected before I severed the tie. My parents were seated next to me, a buffer zone. Linda and Gerald were across from Tessa, so they would have a front row seat to her unraveling. I went into the living room and adjusted the Bluetooth speaker on the bookshelf. It was a high-end model, loud and clear. I connected my phone to it and tested the connection. I played a soft jazz track, then paused it. I made sure the volume was turned up to 70%, not deafening, but impossible to ignore. I placed the cream-colored folder in the top drawer of the sideboard in the dining room. It was within arm's reach. The thick black folder, the one for Logan, I slipped into my oversized tote bag. I placed the bag on a chair near the kitchen door. Finally, I went upstairs to get dressed. I chose a dress I had bought a year ago but never worn. It was a deep emerald green, structured and sharp. It was not a soft, romantic dress. It was a power suit disguised as evening wear. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the master bedroom. I looked at my reflection. I saw the lines of tension around my mouth, but I also saw something else. Clarity. For 3 years, I had been playing a role. I have been a grateful wife, the lucky girl, the one who walked on eggshells hoping not to crack the veneer of this perfect life. I had let them tell me who I was. I had let Tessa write the narrative of my past. I reached into my jewelry box and put on my diamond earrings. They felt cold and heavy. Not tonight, I whispered to the woman in the mirror. Tonight, I was not the character in their play. I was the playwright. I was the director. And I was the critic who was about to write the most scathing review of their lives. I checked my phone one last time. The email draft was open. The cursor blinked at me, steady and waiting. I put the phone in my pocket. I smoothed down my dress. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the expensive, climate-controlled air of the house that Nate wanted to kick me out of. Okay, I said aloud. Showtime. I turned off the bedroom light and walked downstairs to welcome my guests. The air in the dining room was thick with the smell of rosemary and roasted garlic, a scent that usually signaled comfort, but tonight felt suffocating. We were back at the table. The scene of the crime where my marriage was currently being dissected like the roast chicken I had spent 3 hours preparing. 10 minutes ago, everything had been perfect. The wine was breathing in the decanter. The conversation was flowing over safe, Shallow Rocks weather, real estate, the upcoming holidays. Linda, my mother-in-law, had just wiped the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin, looked at me with a rare warmth, and said the words that triggered the avalanche. "You really are a natural, Eloise," she had said, gesturing to the spread. "You are so suited to being a wife. I tell Gerald all the time, Nate chose well." It was the validation I had craved for 3 years. And across the table, I saw it hit Tessa like a physical slap. Her eyes narrowed, the alcohol she had been nursing all night finally stripping away her filter. She swirled her Pinot Noir, the red liquid climbing high up the sides of the glass, dangerous and unstable. "Suited to be a wife," Tessa echoed, a small, sharp laugh escaping her lips. She tilted her head, her eyes locking onto mine with a predatory gleam. "That is a funny way to put it. Linda, do you mean a second wife?" The room seemed to tilt on its axis. The clinking of silverware stopped instantly. "You know she is married, right?" Tessa continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "I mean still married." This was the moment I had replayed in my head 1,000 times since I found that receipt in her pocket, in my fantasies. Nate would slam his hand on the table. He would tell her to get out. He would protect me. But fantasies are for children. Nate jerked in his chair. His head snapped toward Tessa, then slowly, agonizingly, turned to me. His eyes were not filled with defensive anger. They were filled with a dark, hungry curiosity. It was the look of a man who had just been handed a life raft and was checking to see if it would float. "Tessa," Nate said, his voice steady but cold. "What are you talking about?" He was not shutting her down. He was inviting her in. He was handing her the microphone. Tessa feigned a look of shock, bringing a hand to her chest in a performance of innocence that was almost impressive in its depravity. "Oh God, Nate, I thought you knew. I mean, everyone in Ohio knows. It was that Vegas trip when she was 21. She looked around the table, gathering her audience. "It was wild. They were totally wasted. She married that musician guy, Kyle. And knowing Eloise well, she is not exactly great with paperwork, is she? I just assumed she never actually filed the annulment. I thought she just walked away." She let the implication hang there. Bigamy, fraud, avoid marriage. Linda set her knife down. The metal hit the china with a sharp clink that sounded like a gavel. She looked at me, the warmth from moments ago replaced by a cool, detached assessment. "Eloise," Linda said, her voice dripping with that terrifyingly polite judgment. "My dear, is there something unresolved? Is there something you have not told us?" She looked at me not like a daughter-in-law, but like a bad investment, like a stain on the family crest that needed to be scrubbed out. I looked at my parents. My mother was gripping her fork so hard her knuckles were white, staring at her plate in humiliation. My father looked ready to argue, but he was intimidated by the bakers, silenced by the wealth and the accusation. I turned to Nate. This was his last chance. This was the moment he could choose me. I willed him to look at me and see the woman who managed his life, who loved him, who supported him. "Nate," I said softly, "you know me." He looked at me, and then he looked away. He looked at the table, then at Tessa, and finally back to me. His face was a mask of calculation. "If there is something, Eloise," Nate said, his voice devoid of emotion, "this is the best time to say it, before this goes any further, before we get the lawyers involved again." Again, that one word was the final nail. He was admitting, right there in front of everyone, that he had already been thinking about lawyers. He was admitting that he had been waiting for this. The pain was sharp and immediate, like a knife to the gut, but it was followed instantly by a rush of adrenaline so pure it felt like ice water in my veins. The grief evaporated, the hope died, and in its place, the soldier I had been training for the last week stood up. I did not cry. I did not stammer. I pushed my chair back. The legs scraped against the hardwood floor, a harsh, grating sound that made everyone flinch. "You want the truth?" I asked. My voice was calm. It was terrifyingly calm. "Okay, if tonight is about the truth, then let's put everything on the table." "Where are you going?" Nate demanded, half rising from his chair. "To get the truth," I said. "Since you clearly do not believe it coming from my mouth." I turned my back on them. I walked out of the dining room, my heels clicking on the floorboards. Click, click, click. I walked down the hallway, past the photos of our wedding that hung on the wall, photos of a lie. I walked into the bedroom and turned on the light. I went to the nightstand. I opened the top drawer. There it was, the cream-colored envelope, the defense, the undeniable proof of my freedom. I picked it up. It felt light, but I knew it hit with the force of a sledgehammer. Then I looked at my purse, sitting on the chair. I reached inside and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen. It woke up, glowing bright in the dim room. The email app was open. The draft was there. Subject from Eloise: "You deserve the whole story." To Logan Moore. Attachments: 12 files. I stared at the send button. Tessa wanted to destroy my marriage to hide the cracks in her own. She wanted to use me as a shield. Well, she had forgotten that shields are made of metal, and when you strike them hard enough, the reverberation can shatter your arm. I did not hit send yet, not yet. I wanted to look her in the eye when I did it. I grabbed the phone, I grabbed the envelope, I smoothed down the front of my emerald green dress. I checked my reflection in the mirror one last time. The woman staring back at me was not Eloise the data analyst. She was Eloise the executioner. I walked back down the hallway. The silence from the dining room was heavy, pregnant with anticipation. They were whispering. I could hear the hiss of their voices stopping as I approached. I stepped back into the room. 12 pairs of eyes locked onto me. Tessa looked smug, a tiny smile playing on her lips as she whispered something to Logan. Nate looked anxious, his eyes darting to the papers in my hand. Linda looked like she was smelling something bad. I did not sit down. I walked straight to the head of the table. I stood directly behind Nate. I could smell his cologne, the expensive sandalwood scent I had bought him for his birthday. It made me sick. I reached over his shoulder and dropped the cream-colored envelope onto his plate, right on top of the half-eaten roast chicken. "You want to know if I am married?" I asked, my voice ringing clear in the silent room. "Open it." Nate stared at the envelope. His hand shook slightly as he reached for it. I took a step back. I looked across the table at Tessa. Her smile was faltering now. She saw the confidence in my posture, and for the first time, a flicker of fear crossed her face. I pulled my phone out. I walked around the table, moving slowly and deliberately, like a shark circling in shallow water. I stopped right between Tessa and Logan. I placed the phone on the table, face down. It sat there like a black monolith, a bomb waiting for a detonator. "And since we are sharing secrets," I said, looking directly at Logan, "I have a few things I think the family should see, too." Nate tore the envelope open. The sound of ripping paper was the only noise in the world. He pulled out the certified decree. I watched his eyes widen. I watched the blood drain from his face as he read the date. I waited. I stood there, suspended in the second between the lighting of the fuse and the explosion, and I let myself feel one final moment of peace before I burned the whole house down. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually follows a gunshot, ringing in your ears and sucking the oxygen out of the air. Nate stared at the document in his hands. I watched his eyes dart back and forth, scanning the lines of text that I had memorized by heart. He was looking for a loophole. I knew him. I knew the way his mind worked. He was looking for a missing signature, a wrong date, a typo, anything that would justify the months of coldness and suspicion he had inflicted on me. But there was nothing to find. The document was pristine. It was a certified copy of a final decree of divorce from the 8th Judicial District Court of Nevada. The gold seal was embossed and raised, catching the light from the chandelier. The date was clear, finalized 5 years ago. 2 years before I met Nate. The judge's signature was a heavy, authoritative scrawl in black ink. "Read it," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. "Read the date, Nate." He swallowed hard. His throat clicked. "October 14th, 2018. He read, his voice barely a whisper. "That is right," I said, stepping closer to the table but not sitting down. I gestured to the bottom of the page. "Now, look at the last paragraph, the section titled, Status of Parties. Read that out loud so your mother can hear it." Nate hesitated. He looked up at me, and his eyes were pleading. He wanted me to stop. He wanted me to save him from the humiliation of being wrong in front of his father. But I was done saving him. "Read it," I commanded. "The marriage is dissolved," Nate read, his voice shaking. "Both parties are restored to the status of single persons and are free to marry." I nodded slowly. "Free to marry," which means, Nate, that when I stood at the altar with you 3 years ago, I was not a fraud. I was not a bigamist. Our marriage has never been illegal, unless, of course, inside your head, you wanted it to be. Nate flinched as if I had slapped him. He dropped the paper onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and came to a stop in front of Gerald. My father-in-law, who had been silent this entire time, reached out a hand. His movements were slow and deliberate. He picked up the document. He pulled his reading glasses from his breast pocket, unfolded them, and perched them on his nose. He took his time. He read the header. He read the date. He read the seal. Then, he took his glasses off and looked at his son. "You let her," Gerald said, tilting his head toward Tessa, "drag you into a panic over this." Nate looked down at his plate. "Dad, this is a standard decree." "Nathan," Gerald said, his voice dripping with disappointment, "it is clearer than the deed to this house. You have treated your wife like a criminal for months because you were too cowardly to ask her for a piece of paper. You listened to gossip instead of looking at the facts." It was the first time in 3 years that Gerald Baker had ever taken my side. He tossed the paper back onto the table with a look of disgust. "Embarrassing." The word hung in the air. Linda, who had been staring at the document as if it were a holy relic, suddenly found her voice. Her face flushed a deep, blotchy red that clashed with her silk blouse. She realized the wind had shifted. She realized she had bet on the wrong horse. "Oh, Eloise," she stammered, her hands fluttering nervously. "I had no idea. You have to understand. With everything we hear on the news these days, we just wanted to protect the family. I am so sorry. I should have known better. I should have trusted you." It was a performance. I knew that. Linda did not care about trusting me. She cared about propriety. And right now, she looked improper. She looked like a woman who had bullied an innocent person. "Yes, Linda," I said, my voice cool. "You should have—" I turned back to Nate. He was still looking at the paper, his face pale. "I just wanted to be sure, Elle," he said. "You never told me the details. You just said it was handled. How was I supposed to know you actually went through the whole court process? It was Vegas. People make mistakes." I laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "You are blaming me?" I asked. "You are sitting there, with proof of your own paranoia staring you in the face, and you are blaming me for not providing a legal brief on our first date." "I am not blaming you," Nate protested, though he clearly was. "I am just saying, due diligence is important. I have to protect what I built. What if you were not honest from the start?" "I was honest with my husband," I said, leaning over the table, my hands planted on the wood. "I told the man I loved that I had a past and that it was over. I did not realize I was submitting an application to a risk management officer, but it is a good thing I have the paperwork now, isn't it? Since that is evidently the only language you speak." My parents, who had been shrinking into their chairs earlier, suddenly sat up straighter. My mother cleared her throat. "We drove her to the airport," my mom said. her voice trembling with anger but loud enough to be heard. 7 years ago, we paid for the ticket. We helped her pay the filing fees. We knew she handled it. If anyone had bothered to ask us, instead of treating us like we were invisible, we could have told you. The room fell silent again. The shame on the Baker side of the table was palpable. It was thick and heavy, but there was one person who was not looking at the divorce decree. Tessa. She was gripping her wine glass so hard, I thought the stem might snap. Her eyes were darting around the room, reading the energy. She saw Gerald's disgust. She saw Linda's retreat. She saw Nate's defeat. She realized her little game had backfired. She had tried to oust me, but instead, she had solidified my position. She let out a high, nervous laugh. Okay, she said, waving her hand dismissively. So I was wrong. Good news, right? Honestly, Elle, you do not have to be so intense about it. I was just teasing. I was just looking out for Nate. You know how much I care about you guys. I did not think everyone would take it so seriously. She looked at Logan, seeking an ally. Right. Babe, it was just a joke that got out of hand. Logan did not smile. He was sitting very still, his hands folded in his lap. He was looking at Tessa, but his expression was unreadable. He looked tired. A joke, I repeated. I stood up straight. I smoothed the front of my dress. I looked at Tessa, really looked at her. I saw the fear behind her eyes. She knew she had pushed too far, but she thought the worst consequence would be an awkward dessert and a few weeks of silence. She had no idea. You questioned the legality of my marriage in front of my entire family, I said, my voice dangerously soft. You implied I was a criminal. You made my husband doubt me for months. You almost destroyed my life. And you call that a joke? Tessa shifted in her seat. Elle, come on. Do not be dramatic. I said I was sorry. You are not sorry, Tessa, I said. You are just caught. I walked around the table until I was standing directly behind Logan. I could feel the tension radiating off him. I looked at Tessa across the table. You know, I said, tilting my head, I think you are right. We should not have secrets in this family. If we are going to audit my marriage, it is only fair that we balance the scales a little bit. Don't you think? Tessa froze. Her eyes locked onto mine. What are you talking about? I am talking about transparency, I said. I am talking about that due diligence Nate loves so much. I reached for my phone, which was still lying face down on the table. I picked it up. The screen lit up in my hand. I unlocked it. The email draft was still there. Subject, from Eloise. You deserve the whole story. I looked at Tessa one last time. I wanted her to see me do it. I wanted her to know exactly who pulled the trigger. I think Logan deserves to know the truth, too, I said. Tessa's eyes went wide. She started to stand up. Eloise, wait. My thumb hovered over the blue arrow. Don't, she whispered. I pressed send. A soft whoosh sound came from my phone, signaling the message was gone. I set the phone back down on the table. Right next to the Bluetooth speaker, I set it down gently, with care, as if it were a delicate instrument. There, I said, looking at Logan. Check your inbox. The room was silent for exactly 3 seconds. Then, a loud buzzing vibration erupted from Logan's pocket. The vibration of Logan's phone against the mahogany table sounded like a chainsaw in a library. It was a harsh, mechanical buzz that sliced through the tension in the room. Logan did not reach for it immediately. He stared at the device as if it were a live animal that might bite him. He looked at me, then at Tessa, and finally, his hand moved. He picked it up. I watched his thumb slide across the screen to unlock it. I watched the blue light reflect in his eyes as he opened the notification. What is this? He asked. His voice was quiet, confused. From Eloise. Subject, you deserve the whole story. Don't open it, Tessa said. Her voice was high and thin, panic tightening her throat. She stood up halfway, reaching across the table. Logan, seriously, don't. She is just trying to start drama because she is embarrassed. Sit down, Tessa, I said. I did not raise my voice. I did not have to. Go ahead. Logan, you can put it on speaker if you want. After all, tonight is all about discussing secret marriages, isn't it? It seems only fair we discuss everyone's. Logan ignored Tessa. He tapped the screen. The first file was the PDF of the timeline Maya and I had constructed. But Logan skipped that. He clicked on the first image attachment. I knew exactly what he was looking at. It was the photo of Tessa and Declan Vance standing in the lobby of the Pines Inn. The timestamp in the corner was clearly visible October 14th, 7:15 in the evening. Logan's face went slack. The color drained out of his cheeks, leaving him looking gray and old. He swiped to the next image, the zoomed-in shot of the hotel lamp in the background of her Instagram story. Tessa, Logan said. He did not look up from the phone. Why were you at the Pines Inn on October 14th? Tessa let out a breathless, frantic laugh. What I wasn't. That is Photoshop or something. Eloise is crazy. Logan, you know she has been acting weird. October 14th, Logan repeated, his voice gaining a hard edge. That was the night you told me you were at the corporate retreat in the city. You said you stayed at the Marriott. I did, Tessa insisted, her hands fluttering. I mean, maybe I stopped by the Pines to meet a client for a drink, I told you. I have clients everywhere. A client, Logan said. He swiped again. This is a receipt, Logan read aloud. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Guest name Declan Vance, room 204, 1 king bed, check-in 11:30 in the morning. So, Tessa shrilled. So what? That is, Declan's receipt. I do not even know why she has that. Eloise is stalking people now. This is insane. Nate, tell her she is insane. Nate did not say a word. He was staring at his wife, then at his cousin, looking like a man watching a car crash in slow motion. Keep reading, Logan, I said softly. Look at the bottom of the receipt, the food order. Logan squinted at the screen. Room service, 2 club sandwiches, 1 bottle of Pinot Noir, 2 chocolate mousses. He looked up. His eyes were red, rimmed with sudden, violent tears. You hate chocolate mousse, Tessa, but you order it every time we go out because you say it makes you feel fancy. Logan, please, Tessa begged, moving around the table toward him. It is not what it looks like. It was a work lunch. We just ate in the room because the restaurant was loud. That is all. It was just lunch. Lunch in a room with 1 king bed, Logan asked. Lunch that lasted 3 hours according to the checkout time. Yes, Tessa cried. Yes, we were working. Eloise is twisting everything. She is jealous because our marriage is perfect and hers is a sham. My marriage, I interrupted, my voice cutting through her hysteria like a blade, is perfectly legal. We just established that. But yours, Tessa, yours is the one built on a lie. I turned to Logan. I am sorry. Logan, truly, I did not want to be the one to show you this. I have known for weeks. I found the receipt in her coat pocket when she left it at my house. I saw the texts on her second phone. Second phone. Logan looked at Tessa, horror dawning on his face. She keeps it in her purse, I said. Ask her to open her bag right now. Tessa clutched her purse to her chest, backing away from the table. The guilt was written in every line of her body. Linda, who had been watching this unfold with her mouth slightly open, suddenly stood up. She looked at Tessa, the niece she had adored, the girl she had wished I was, and her expression curdled. You, Linda whispered. It was a sound of pure betrayal. You sat here and told me Eloise was the liar. You made me question my own son's marriage. You made me shame her in her own home. Aunt Linda, Tessa started. Quiet, Linda snapped. It was the first time I had ever heard her raise her voice. You made us look like fools. Tessa, you dragged this family into the mud to hide your own filth. The room seemed to shrink. It was just Logan and Tessa now. The rest of us were just spectators to the demolition. Logan scrolled through the rest of the email. He read the text logs I had transcribed. Can't stop thinking about last night. Meet me at the usual spot. He lowered the phone to the table. He took a deep breath, his chest heaving. He did not scream. He did not flip the table. He was terrifyingly calm. "You know what the worst part is?" Logan asked, looking at Tessa. "It is not the guy. I mean, that hurts. God, that hurts. But it is not the worst part. Babe, please, we can fix this," Tessa sobbed, reaching for his arm. He pulled away sharply. "The worst part," Logan said, "is that for the last 3 months, every night when I came home, you told me a new story about Eloise. You told me she was unstable. You told me she was a gold digger. You told me Nate should be careful." He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "You made me hate her, Tessa. You made me look at my wife's cousin and see a villain, and all the while, you were doing this. You were projecting your own guilt onto her so no one would look at you." "I didn't," Tessa wept. "I was just worried about Nate." "You were not worried about Nate," Logan said. "You were worried about getting caught. You needed a distraction. You needed a scapegoat." He stood up. The chair scraped back. He looked at his left hand. He twisted the gold band on his finger. It was tight. But he pulled. He twisted it over the knuckle. He did not throw it. He did not fling it across the room. He simply placed it on the table, right next to the half-empty wine glass Tessa had been drinking from. The sound of the gold ring hitting the wood was soft. Click. "Logan," Tessa gasped. No, please. It was one time. It was a mistake. It meant nothing." "One time?" I asked. "The timeline covers 6 months. Tessa, that is not a mistake. That is a hobby." Logan looked at me. His eyes were filled with pain, but there was gratitude there, too, a dark, heavy gratitude. "Thank you, Eloise," he said. "I mean that. Thank you for telling me." "I am sorry I had to do it this way," I said. "No," Logan said. "I needed to see it. I needed to see her lie about it in front of everyone." He turned to walk away. "Logan," Tessa screamed, grabbing his jacket. "You can't leave. We have to talk about this." He gently removed her hands from his jacket, peeling her fingers off one by one as if they were sticky with something he did not want to touch. "We will talk," Logan said. "At the house, I'm going to go pack a bag. You can come home when you are done finishing your wine." He walked out. We heard the front door open and close. The sound of his car engine starting outside was final. Tessa stood there, shaking. Her face was a ruin of smeared mascara and splotchy red skin. She looked at Nate, begging for an ally. Nate looked at the ceiling. She looked at Linda. Linda turned her chair away. She looked at me. "You ruined everything," she hissed. "Are you happy? You destroyed my life because of one mistake?" "It wasn't one mistake, Tessa," I said, my voice steady. "And I didn't destroy your life. You did that when you walked into room 204. I picked up my wine glass and took a sip. It tasted excellent. "But you want to know the real reason I did this?" I asked. "I would have kept your secret. Tessa, honestly, I didn't care enough about you to blow up your marriage. I would have let you destroy yourself in private." I leaned forward. "But then you decided to use me. You decided to use my past, my reputation, and my marriage as a smokescreen to hide your affair. You used me as a shield. Tessa." I set the glass down. "Well," I said, "the shield is done protecting you. The shield is speaking now." I looked around the table. The dinner was ruined. The roast was cold. The family was shattered. Nate was looking at me. He was not looking at me with love, exactly. He was looking at me with fear. And for the first time in our marriage, he was looking at me with respect. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that I was not just a passive accessory in his life. I was a force. Tessa collapsed into her chair, putting her head in her hands, sobbing into the tablecloth. She was alone. For the first time in her life, her charm, her lies, and her family name could not save her. I picked up my napkin and dabbed my mouth. "Does anyone want dessert?" I asked. I made a tart. No one answered, and that was perfectly fine by me. The conference room of Quinn Associates smelled of lemon polish and expensive litigation. It was a cold, sterile space on the 14th floor of a glass tower in downtown Brookdale, far removed from the warmth of the dining room where my marriage had imploded 3 months ago. I sat on one side of the mahogany table, my hands folded on top of a thick file. Next to me was Harper Quinn, looking like a shark in a silk blouse. On the other side sat Nate. He looked thinner. His suit, usually tailored to perfection, hung slightly loose on his shoulders. He would not meet my eyes. We were here to sign a separation agreement. In the weeks following the disastrous dinner party, Nate had tried. He really had. He had bought flowers. He had booked us into a couples therapist. He had cried on the edge of the bed, swearing that he had only been manipulated by Tessa, that he was a victim of her lies just as much as I was. I was just scared, he had said during our second session. Tessa kept whispering in my ear. I just wanted to protect what I had built. I was afraid of losing everything. That phrase, what I had built, every time he said it, I felt a wall go up. He never said what we built. He never acknowledged the 3 years I spent managing his life, renovating his house, soothing his ego, and networking for his firm. In his mind, I was still just a tenant. Harper had advised me to do a full financial audit before signing anything. Trust is gone, Eloise, she had said. Now we rely on math. The math had been brutal. During the discovery phase, Harper found something interesting. 6 months ago, right around the time Tessa started planting her seeds of doubt, Nate had taken out a significant business loan. It was for $75,000, and he had used our house, the house my name was on, as collateral. He had not asked me. He had forged my signature on the consent form. I looked at him across the table. He was fidgeting with his pen. We are ready to sign the standard agreement, Nate's lawyer said, sliding a document toward us. 50-50 split on the marital assets. Nate keeps the house. Eloise gets a payout for her share of the equity. Harper put her hand over the document, stopping it. Actually, Harper said, her voice pleasant but sharp as a razor, we are not signing that. We are looking at a different arrangement today. Nate frowned. What? We agreed on the split. Eloise? Do not make this difficult. I am not making it difficult, Nate, I said. I am making it fair. Harper opened the file in front of us. She pulled out a stack of printed emails. She slid them across the table, fanning them out like a winning poker hand. These, Harper said, were provided to us by Mr. Logan Moore during his own divorce proceedings against Ms. Tessa Moore. He thought Eloise should see them. Nate looked down. I watched the blood drain from his face until he was the color of old parchment. I knew what was in those emails. I had read them until I had them memorized. They were not just Nate listening to Tessa's gossip. They were a conspiracy. From Nate Baker to Tessa Moore. Date August 12th, subject Re. The Vegas issue. Tessa, if we can prove the Vegas marriage was never annulled, does that make my current marriage void? I need to know if this invalidates her claim to the house. If I can prove fraud, I can keep the equity. Ask your friend-in-law what the precedent is. From Tessa Moore to Nate Baker. Date August 12th. Subject Re. The Vegas issue. It absolutely would. If she is a bigamist, she gets nothing. Just keep quiet until we have the proof. Do not let her know you are digging. We will save your portfolio. Don't worry. I watched Nate read his own words. The silence in the room was heavy, pressing down on us. You weren't just scared, Nate, I said quietly. You were planning a heist. You were actively working with my cousin to figure out how to cut me out of my own home. You weren't worried about the sanctity of our marriage. You were worried about your portfolio. Nate looked up. His eyes were wet. Please. I panicked. I didn't mean it. It was just talk. It was a conspiracy to commit fraud, Harper corrected him. And coupled with the fact that you forged Eloise's signature on that business loan, which we also have proof of, we are in a position to file both a civil suit and a criminal complaint. Nate's lawyer grabbed the emails, reading them frantically. He whispered something urgently into Nate's ear. Nate looked like he was going to be sick. "What do you want?" Nate asked, his voice cracking. "I want the house," I said. "What?" Nate sat up straighter. "No, that is my family home. I put the down payment on it. And you used it to gamble on a loan without my consent," I said. "And you conspired to defraud me of my share. So, here is the deal. You transfer the deed to me, sole ownership. I will refinance and remove your name from the mortgage. In exchange, I won't file a police report about the forgery, and I won't sue you and Tessa for defamation and conspiracy." "That is impossible," Nate sputtered. "That is hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity." "Think of it as the cost of doing business," Harper said. "Or think of it as the cost of keeping your reputation intact. Because if this goes to court, these emails become public record. How will the partners at your firm feel about you forging signatures and plotting against your wife?" Nate looked at his lawyer. The lawyer sighed and closed his folder. He gave a small, imperceptible nod. It took 20 minutes to rewrite the agreement. Nate signed the papers with a shaking hand. He looked defeated, broken, and small. "I really did love you, Eloise," he said as he stood up to leave, his voice hollow. "I just don't know why I listened to her." "You listened to her because she told you what you wanted to hear," I said, gathering my things. "You wanted an excuse to protect your money more than you wanted a wife. Now you have your money, and I have the house." I walked out of the office without looking back. The elevator ride down was smooth. When the doors opened to the lobby, I saw a familiar figure sitting on one of the leather benches. Logan. He stood up when he saw me. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered, but he also looked lighter. He was not wearing his wedding ring. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied. "Thank you for the emails. Logan, they changed everything." "I figured they might," he said. "I found them on her laptop when I was packing up her things. I couldn't let her get away with it, not after what she did to us." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thin white envelope. "I just came from my lawyers. I signed the papers today. It is done." He handed me the envelope. "I sent a copy of this to your parents, and to Linda and Gerald. I thought you should have one, too." I opened it. It was a printout of an email Logan had sent to the entire extended family. "To everyone. I am writing this to clear the air regarding the end of my marriage to Tessa and the rumors regarding Eloise. I want to make it formally clear that Eloise Baker has been the victim of a malicious campaign of lies orchestrated by Tessa. Eloise's past is honorable, and her integrity is intact. I apologize to Eloise for ever doubting her. I hope the family can heal from the damage my ex-wife caused." I looked up at Logan. My eyes stung. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes," Logan said. "I did. You chose the truth that night at dinner. It inspired me to do the same. We are the ones who have to live with ourselves. Eloise, might as well do it with a clean conscience." He gave me a small, sad smile. "Take care of yourself. Elle? You too. Logan?" He walked out the revolving doors. Stepping into the bustle of the city, I watched him go, feeling a strange sense of solidarity. We were the survivors of the wreck. We had made it to shore. I drove back to Maple Ridge. Pulling into the driveway of the house, it looked different. It didn't look like the Baker estate anymore. It looked like a building made of brick and wood. It looked like my house. I walked inside. The silence was not heavy anymore. It was peaceful. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I stood at the island where I had placed the divorce decree that night. I looked at my left hand. The diamond ring still sparkled under the recessed lighting. Slowly, I slid it off. It left a pale band of skin on my finger, a ghost of a promise that had been broken long ago. I placed the ring on the wooden countertop. It made a soft click. I walked into the study and opened my laptop. The folder was there on the desktop. Truth Night. It was full of pain. It was full of evidence of betrayal, of lies, of the worst parts of the people I had loved. I had backed it all up on an external drive, locked away in a safe deposit box, just in case. But I didn't need to look at it every day. I right-clicked on the folder. I selected Delete. Are you sure you want to move Truth Night to the trash? I didn't hesitate. Yes, I whispered. The folder vanished. I sat back in the chair and looked out the window at the autumn trees stripping their leaves, getting ready for winter. But I knew spring would come. Everyone said I had 2 marriages. They whispered that I was the woman who collected husbands. But as I sat there in the quiet of my own home, free from the weight of secrets and suspicion, I realized the truth. The only marriage I had just ended was the marriage to silence, and I had never felt more faithful to myself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while cooking dinner in London, driving to work in New York, or maybe relaxing in Sydney? Please let me know in the comments below so we can share our thoughts together. And if you enjoyed seeing the truth come out, please subscribe to the Zoe Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so this story can reach even more people. Your support means the world to me.